In 1940, while bombs fell nightly on London and the Channel convoys burned under German air attacks, a quieter war unfolded hundreds of miles away, in the cafes, hotels, and alleys of Madrid. Spain called itself neutral, but its capital had become a crossroad of empires. British, German, and American agents sat only tables apart, trading secrets through coded notes slipped under espresso cups. Spain was neutral, MI6 officer Peter Wilkinson later wrote, but every shadow had a flag. After the Spanish Civil War ended in 1939, Francisco Franco's regime owed much to Hitler and Mussolini. British intelligence feared Spain might soon side with the Axis, handing Germany access to the Strait of Gibraltar, the lifeline between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. If Gibraltar fell, Britain's naval dominance would collapse, cutting supplies to the Middle East. For Winston Churchill and MI6, keeping Spain neutral became as vital as defending the skies over London. In June 1940, as France fell, MI6 sent its first wave of field officers to Madrid and Lisbon. Officially, they were diplomats, journalists, and trade attaches. In truth, they were spies armed with false passports, invisible ink, and a few coded radio transmitters smuggled inside typewriters. Among them was Peter Wilkinson, a fluent Spanish speaker whose cover was as a cultural attaché at the British Embassy. His real mission: to map German networks operating in Spain and report any movement toward Gibraltar. Wilkinson's team operated out of the Hotel Florida near Gran Via, an establishment famous for hosting both Republican and nationalist sympathizers during the Civil War. The lobby still smelled of gunpowder and perfume, a place where conversations changed lives. German WWII officers frequented the same bar, often drinking cognac while scanning the room for familiar faces. One wrong glance, one misplaced phrase, and an agent could disappear before dawn. The British were vastly outnumbered. The WWII, under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, had already built a vast network through German businesses and Spanish phalangists. They recruited innkeepers, port workers, and even priests to report on Allied shipping. Every MI6 message risked interception, every handshake a potential betrayal. It was, Wilkinson would recall, a chess game played in fog. In September 1940, the tension peaked when MI6 intercepted reports suggesting German divisions were preparing to cross the Pyrenees. Operation Felix, the Nazi plan to seize Gibraltar, was allegedly imminent. Wilkinson and his superior Alan Hilgarth, the British naval attaché in Madrid, scrambled to confirm the intelligence. Hilgarth's cables to London were cautious yet urgent. If Spain moves, we lose the gate. Their strategy was twofold: persuasion and subversion. Diplomatically, Britain courted Spanish generals with promises of post-war trade and covert financial incentives. Secretly, MI6 funneled gold through Swiss banks to buy the loyalty of key figures within Franco's regime. You must imagine, Hilgarth wrote in his diary, a world where patriotism is priced daily in pesetas. But the work was perilous. In November 1940, a young British courier named Thomas Wainwright vanished en route from Lisbon to Madrid. His briefcase contained sensitive codes linking MI6 Madrid to London headquarters. He was never seen again. German radio monitors went silent for 3 days afterward, as though the WWII had captured something and someone important. Wilkinson later wrote only, "We lost a man and perhaps a piece of ourselves." The Spanish people watched from the sidelines, exhausted by years of civil bloodshed. Hunger and repression silenced dissent, yet in the marketplaces and taverns, gossip flowed. British agents listened carefully, piecing together scraps of truth from waiters and merchants. Information, not bullets, was the weapon of this war. Each intercepted rumor might tip the balance between invasion and survival. By year's end, Operation Felix stalled. Hitler met Franco at Hendaye in October, but negotiations collapsed. Spain would remain non-belligerent. Historians credit multiple reasons: Franco's caution, Germany's distractions. But in the shadows, MI6's bribery and manipulation had done their quiet work. Britain breathed a cautious sigh of relief. Still, the victory came with unease. Wilkinson wrote in a December 1940 report, "We have bought time but not trust. Spain smiles at us today, yet we walk her streets as ghosts." The neutral territory remained a labyrinth of divided loyalties, where agents from both sides vanished without record. For the men who fought in Spain's invisible war, there was no battlefield glory, only the endless weight of silence. They won no medals, only the knowledge that their quiet efforts may have saved a fortress and perhaps a nation. As the new year approached, Wilkinson's final entry for 1940 read simply, "Madrid sleeps under false stars. We hold the line in the dark." What none of them knew was that the shadow game had only begun, and that one of their own would soon turn the whole operation inside out. By early 1941, Madrid had become one of the most dangerous cities in Europe to carry a British passport. The cafes that once served as neutral ground now buzzed with quiet tension, each conversation potentially fatal. Amid this tense calm, a tall, charming correspondent for the Times moved easily between press circles and embassies. His name was Harold Kim Philby, and though few suspected it, he had come not only to report, but to spy. Officially, Philby's role was to document Spain's delicate neutrality. Unofficially, he was an MI6 liaison officer operating under Alan Hilgarth's direction, assigned to coordinate British intelligence activities across Madrid and Lisbon. His task: gather intelligence on German movements, monitor Franco's leanings, and establish safe channels for Allied couriers traveling through Spain. But every coded cable he sent carried the weight of danger. The WWII and Gestapo were tightening their grip on Iberian communications, infiltrating telegraph offices and intercepting diplomatic pouches. Every message could be his last. MI6 faced a profound dilemma. Spain's neutrality made open operations impossible. Agents operated without the protection of uniform or embassy immunity. Arrest could mean execution without trial. The British had to balance diplomacy with espionage, walking a razor's edge. As one field report from late 1941 noted, "Our men must wear masks even in their own minds." Philby's charm became his greatest weapon. He cultivated informants among Spanish officers, German businessmen, and even within the Vatican's diplomatic circles. His apartment in the Calle de Serrano served as both a newsroom and a listening post, fitted with hidden transmitters linked to a safe house in Lisbon. He recruited couriers, often young British volunteers from the embassy, who risked everything to carry microfilm intelligence across the border to Portugal. Some never made it. "Spain is not neutral," Philby wrote in a coded letter to London. "It merely hides the war under silk and smoke." He wasn't wrong. German agents paid local police to shadow British operatives. The WWII's Madrid bureau, run by Paul Windsor, orchestrated abductions under the guise of political arrests. Meanwhile, British safe houses were raided with uncanny precision, suggesting a mole, perhaps even within MI6's own circle. The line between ally and enemy blurred further each week. Behind the elegant facade of Madrid's Grand Via, moral decay set in. British officers attended Franco's receptions, shaking hands with men who privately funneled intelligence to Berlin. Gold exchanged hands as often as greetings. In his diary, Alan Hilgarth lamented, "We are losing our souls one cigar at a time." For agents like Philby, deception became routine, loyalty a question without a clear answer. Unknown to his superiors, Philby's personal loyalties were already divided. Though a loyal servant to Britain on paper, he had been recruited years earlier by Soviet intelligence. While working in Spain, he not only gathered information on the Germans, but also funneled selected reports back to Moscow. His reports were filtered through subtle alterations, small omissions that distorted London's picture of Axis influence. No one in MI6 suspected the elegant correspondent with a quick wit and Oxford polish. Still, Philby's skill and luck kept him alive. In May 1941, he barely escaped an ambush on a country road between Madrid and Burgos, after meeting a Spanish colonel willing to sell documents on German troop deployments. His driver was shot dead. Philby, bleeding from shrapnel, dragged himself into the brush and lay still as the assassins searched the wreckage. He later described the experience dryly. "In Spain, even the trees had ears." The report he carried, hidden in the sole of his shoe, eventually reached London and confirmed that Spain would not allow German divisions to cross the Pyrenees. To the outside world, he became a minor hero within British intelligence, a man who had risked his life to keep Spain neutral. Within MI6, his reputation grew, granting him deeper access to operations across the Iberian Peninsula. But in the shadows, rumors spread. 2 British couriers had disappeared, and an encoded notebook retrieved from a dead German agent hinted at an insider feeding information to both sides. The entry read only, "The journalist knows." Such whispers could destroy careers, but in the covert world of 1941 Madrid, proof mattered less than perception. Hilgarth dismissed the suggestion, writing, "Philby's work speaks for itself. Let results outweigh rumors." The decision would haunt British intelligence for decades. Philby himself seemed haunted by what the war demanded. In a private letter to his wife Aileen, he wrote, "One learns to kill a part of oneself to serve a cause. The trick is remembering which part was real." The letter was never sent. It remained sealed in his Madrid flat, later found and archived by MI5 long after the war. By autumn, as the United States prepared for entry into the conflict, British operations in Spain intensified. New agents arrived under false passports, replacing those lost to arrests or disappearances. MI6 and OSS officers began collaborating in Lisbon, creating a broader intelligence web stretching from Tangier to Gibraltar. But the shadow of betrayal lingered over every success. As 1941 ended, Madrid's secret war had become a test of moral endurance as much as strategy. Those who survived learned that loyalty, like neutrality, was often a mask. Philby's star rose higher, even as his deceptions deepened the cracks within the very organization he served. The city slept beneath its veil of smoke and mirrors, unaware that within its labyrinth of spies, the seeds of one of Britain's greatest betrayals had already taken root. And soon, the whispers would give way to something darker, a secret operation so audacious that not all who entered it would live to tell the tale. By the spring of 1942, the tide of war had shifted, but in the neutral corridors of Spain and Portugal, another front was being drawn. The Allied invasion of North Africa loomed, and the British knew that control of the Iberian Peninsula's intelligence networks would be decisive. It was during this tense interlude that MI6 launched one of its most secret of operations, Operation GoldenEye. The operations architect was Commander Ian Fleming, then serving as the Naval Intelligence Division's liaison to MI6. Before he was known for creating James Bond, Fleming was a real-life planner of clandestine strategies. GoldenEye's mission was simple in concept yet perilous in execution: establish an intelligence and sabotage network in neutral Spain and Portugal to monitor Axis activities, secure Allied communications, and prepare for sabotage should Germany invade the Iberian Peninsula. Fleming chose its name for a secluded Jamaican estate he would one day own, but its roots lay in the secret British gambit. In June 1942, MI6 officers began setting up listening posts disguised as British consulates and radio stations hidden in farmhouses along Spain's western coast. The equipment, bulky wireless sets built by the Special Operations Executive (SOE), was smuggled in pieces across the Pyrenees and reassembled under cover of night. British field agents operated under diplomatic covers, their missions cloaked in silence even from other embassy staff. One of these agents, a young radio operator named Arthur Selby, kept a diary. "Madrid is not a city," he wrote. "It is a whisper stretched thin." His notes recorded coded transmissions, late-night meetings in the Plaza Mayor, and growing fear of discovery. On July 3, 1942, his diary ended abruptly mid-sentence. "If they find me tonight," Selby, and his transmitter vanished without a trace. His call sign was never heard again. GoldenEye faced constant danger from German counterintelligence. The WWII's network in Spain had expanded to include Spanish naval officers and businessmen loyal to Berlin. MI6 couriers were trailed through the streets of Seville. Safe houses were raided in Bilbao and Barcelona. One captured agent, interrogated by the Gestapo in Tangier, reportedly spoke only a single sentence before dying under torture: "GoldenEye watches still." From London, Commander Fleming received cryptic reports via coded cables: "I compromised. Field silence north. Asset 47 missing." It was clear that GoldenEye was leaking, perhaps through Philby's Madrid network, perhaps through Spanish intermediaries bribed by the Germans. The uncertainty gnawed at London's confidence. Yet the operation could not be abandoned. Too much depended on its eyes and ears. Gibraltar's safety, Allied troop movements, and even the success of Operation Torch, the Allied landings in North Africa, all hinge on intelligence flowing from the Iberian Peninsula. Amid the chaos, Fleming arrived briefly in Lisbon under diplomatic escort to assess the situation firsthand. He met Hilgarth and a handful of MI6 officers in a secluded villa outside Estoril. The meeting, later recounted in declassified files, read like a scene from one of Fleming's later novels. Maps spread on mahogany tables, cigarette smoke curling through lamplight, men arguing in whispers about how to salvage a dying network. "We're running out of friends," Hilgarth warned. "And the Germans have too many years." Fleming's reply was succinct: "Then we must speak in silence." The British began rerouting communications through Portugal's diplomatic pouches and encrypted OSS channels. A joint Allied intelligence cell was created, codenamed Section 10, linking British, American, and Free French operatives. The cooperation marked one of the earliest instances of what would later become the special relationship between UK and US intelligence services. Yet the danger remained relentless. In August 1942, two Section 10 couriers disappeared while traveling by train from Lisbon to Madrid. Their bodies were never recovered, though German documents later referenced valuable materials secured in transit. As the year waned, Operation GoldenEye reached its most critical phase. Allied command prepared for the invasion of North Africa, and GoldenEye's agents were tasked with mapping Axis communications across Iberia. They monitored radio chatter from U-boat bases in Bordeaux and followed German logistics through Spanish ports. Every intercepted message carried immense risk, but also vital insight. Thanks to these reports, British codebreakers at Bletchley Park were able to anticipate U-boat redeployments in the Atlantic, saving countless lives. Still, for those on the ground, the victories felt hollow. Agents vanished without explanation, safe houses went dark, and couriers who left for Portugal never returned. By November 1942, GoldenEye had lost nearly a third of its field operatives. Fleming, back in London, noted grimly in a memorandum, "GoldenEye will not blink, though the eyes be closed." Historians now believe that elements of the operation persisted into 1943 under new names, but many of its records remain classified or destroyed. The true fate of several agents, including Selby, was never discovered. Their transmissions, their whispers, faded into the static of history. Yet in the silence they left behind, one truth remained. The Shadow War in Spain was not just about intelligence. It was about endurance, loyalty, and the thin line between light and darkness. And as the Allies prepared for new offensives, a far deeper betrayal was about to unfold, one that would strike from within MI6 itself. By 1943, the Shadow War in Spain had become a tangle of half-truths, betrayals, and quiet disappearances. Operation GoldenEye still flickered in the dark, but its surviving agents now moved like hunted ghosts. Madrid was teeming with diplomats, journalists, and spies, each pretending not to see the other. For MI6, every telegram and courier crossing the Portuguese border carried both promise and peril. The first blow came in February 1943. A diplomatic courier named Captain Robert Hale left Lisbon with a sealed pouch bound for the British Embassy in Madrid. The package contained cipher keys and coded directives from London. He never arrived. Spanish authorities claimed his car veered off a mountain road near Avila, but no wreckage was ever found. The report was too convenient, too clean. MI6 suspected foul play, perhaps abwehr interference, perhaps something more insidious. Within weeks, another courier vanished. This time, a young clerk named Evelyn Grant, traveling by train from Gibraltar to Madrid, disappeared after crossing into Spanish territory. Witnesses recalled her sharing a compartment with a well-dressed German-speaking man who claimed to be a Swiss diplomat. The man disembarked in Seville. She was never seen again. Alan Hilgarth's reports to London grew increasingly grim. "We are being bled in silence," he wrote. "The enemy takes not our armies, but our voices." MI6 began an internal review, suspecting a mole within their Iberian network. Cipher changes were ordered, couriers reassigned, and London's patience began to fray. But each investigation led only to dead ends. Files misplaced, witnesses vanished, and trails that dissolved into rumor. In mid-1943, a single clue surfaced. Spanish police in Burgos intercepted a dead drop containing fragments of British cipher paper mixed with German radio frequencies. The handwriting matched an agent from the Madrid legation, a man long trusted for his diligence and discretion. He was quietly recalled to London, interrogated, and later released for lack of conclusive evidence. His name was never revealed in official records, but some historians believe he was one of the early signs of Kim Philby's influence seeping through the network. Meanwhile, Madrid itself became a pressure cooker. The British Embassy, ostensibly neutral ground, was under constant surveillance by Franco's secret police, the Direction General de Seguridad. Microphones were found hidden in office walls, embassy mail tampered with, and a Spanish typist discovered passing documents to a German liaison. "We are living in a glass house," wrote one MI6 officer. "Every whisper can be heard if one listens long enough." And still, the disappearances continued. An entire field team assigned to monitor German shipping in Vigo vanished en route to Lisbon. Their car was later discovered at a remote farmstead, burned to the frame. No bodies, no papers. Only the faint smell of petrol and a single surviving document, a charred memo stamped GoldenEye Sector 3. It was never determined whether the Germans, the Spanish, or the British themselves destroyed it to cover a breach. The human toll deepened the mistrust. MI6 officers, sleep-deprived and paranoid, began turning on one another. A surviving diary entry from a field agent reads, "We dine together, but none of us are sure we'll wake tomorrow. The enemy has our habits, our maps, our minds." The note ended with a question mark, as if the writer doubted even his own allegiance. Behind closed doors, London debated shutting down the Madrid station entirely. But Hilgarth argued against withdrawal, warning that abandoning Spain would hand the peninsula to German intelligence. He proposed instead a counter-espionage operation, codenamed Silhouette, to identify the source of leaks. The plan required baiting the mole with false intelligence, reports suggesting an Allied plot to invade Spain through the Basque Coast. Within days, those fabricated details appeared in a German intelligence briefing. Proof of betrayal at last. But even as the net tightened, the traitor remained unnamed. Some suspected the embassy's radio officer, others a British commercial attaché with too much access to cipher rooms. The trail again dissolved in silence. London classified the incident, labeling it unresolved, internal. The secrecy suited both sides. Britain could not risk scandal during wartime. Germany had no reason to expose a source that served them so well. As 1943 drew to a close, the atmosphere in Madrid was one of exhaustion and quiet despair. Allied victories in North Africa and Italy had turned the tide of war, yet in Spain, nothing felt secure. The neutral facade hid too much blood, too many lies. In one of his final reports from the year, Hilgarth wrote, "Trust was the first casualty of Spain. We move in darkness, guided only by the sound of our own footsteps." The line would later appear in declassified training manuals for MI6 recruits, a warning from those who had survived the invisible front. But not all had survived. Files from late 1943 list 4 British agents missing, presumed dead in Spain. Among them was a man named Arthur Selby, the radio operator from Operation GoldenEye, whose last diary line had ended mid-sentence. His disappearance linked the old operation to the new betrayals, forming a single thread through years of shadow conflict. And somewhere in London, one rising officer, Kim Philby, read those reports with calm detachment. He knew the names, the faces, and the stories behind each loss. For him, the war in Spain had been a proving ground, a laboratory of loyalty and deception. The ghosts of Madrid had done their work. In the quiet of MI6 headquarters, the next phase of the Shadow War was already taking shape, one that would make the Iberian disappearances look almost merciful by comparison. By 1944, as Allied troops advanced through Italy and prepared for the invasion of France, the secret war in Spain entered its most deceptive phase. Though Madrid's streets appeared calm, the espionage networks beneath them were in turmoil. MI6's fragile grip on Iberia's intelligence scene had been weakened by years of infiltration and betrayal. Yet, in the midst of this uncertainty, the British launched one of the most audacious deception operations of the entire war, an operation that would change the course of history, Operation Mincemeat. Officially, Spain remained neutral. In practice, it was a diplomatic minefield where both the British and Germans competed for influence over Franco's regime. The Nazis courted Spanish officers with promises of shared glory, while the British sought subtler victories, ones achieved not by force, but by persuasion, misinformation, and illusion. Hilgarth and his exhausted MI6 team in Madrid became the linchpin of this delicate balance, coordinating the Spanish end of mincemeat's deception. The plan was extraordinary in its simplicity. A body, dressed as a British officer carrying false invasion plans, would wash ashore on Spain's southern coast, convincing the Germans that the Allies intended to land in Greece rather than Sicily. It would be up to the British embassy in Madrid and MI6's deep ties within the Spanish military to ensure the documents reached German hands accidentally. The man behind much of this orchestration was Hilgarth himself, working in tandem with British naval intelligence in London. In April 1943, the body, codenamed Major William Martin, drifted ashore near Huelva. Spanish fishermen discovered it and reported the find to local authorities. Within hours, German agents in Madrid were informed. The documents were taken to the German embassy, copied, and sent to Berlin. The bait had been taken. What no one knew then was that the entire operation depended on years of groundwork laid by MI6 agents in Spain, who had cultivated trust within the Spanish security services through bribes, favors, and quiet persuasion. "Spain is where truth comes to rest," one MI6 operative wrote in a private note. and lies are given wings. That observation proved prophetic. The Germans swallowed the deception whole, redirecting their defenses toward Greece and Sardinia. The real Allied invasion of Sicily succeeded beyond expectation. Historians later called it one of the most brilliant deception operations of the war, but few acknowledged how much of its success was owed to the perilous web of British intelligence still operating in Madrid. Yet, for the agents on the ground, triumph was hollow. Many of the field officers who had enabled the deception, smuggling letters, bribing officials, and fabricating stories, never saw the operation's results. Some were captured in the ensuing months, others simply vanished from the record. An internal MI6 memo written months later stated coldly, "Operational silence achieved, field assets untraceable." The price of success was anonymity. Amid the quiet victories came personal losses. Hilgarth's trusted assistant, Lieutenant Michael Hughes, disappeared after meeting with a Spanish naval officer in Cadiz. His body was never found, though fragments of his notes resurfaced years later in German archives. One entry read, "The truth feels heavier than gold." Whether he was betrayed or silenced remains unknown. The line between patriotism and manipulation blurred with each passing month. Even Kim Philby, now back in London but overseeing intelligence analysis from the Iberian Front, was deeply involved in reviewing Spanish reports. He praised the work of MI6's Madrid office and personally briefed high-ranking officials on the operation's complete success. Ironically, Philby's role as both analyst and Soviet mole meant that some of these reports also reached Moscow, giving the Soviets a clearer picture of British strategy than London ever suspected. In hindsight, the Shadow War had grown so twisted that even victory was laced with compromise. Within Spain, the war's emotional toll became unbearable. Agents who had served for years under false identities found it impossible to return to normal life. Some stayed behind after 1944, blending into the Spanish landscape under new names. A letter discovered decades later from one anonymous MI6 operative reads, "We deceived the enemy, but in doing so, we deceived ourselves." The mask no longer comes off. For Hilgarth and the remnants of his team, the success of Operation Mincemeat was both triumph and requiem. They had helped save thousands of Allied soldiers and secured one of the greatest strategic diversions in modern warfare, but their network lay in tatters. Too many dead, too many missing, too many secrets buried under the polite smiles of neutral Madrid. By the end of 1944, as Allied forces pushed into France, the once lively British intelligence scene in Spain had gone eerily quiet. The war's center had shifted elsewhere, leaving behind the ghosts of those who fought in silence. Victory, Hilgarth wrote in his last Madrid report, is a soundless thing here. It echoes only in absence, but for some, the war never truly ended. Files classified under GoldenEye and Mincemeat Iberia section were sealed indefinitely. Even decades later, they remain partially redacted. What fragments survive tell a simple, haunting truth. The victories that shaped history were often paid for by people the world would never know. And in that silence, one man, Kim Philby, was already shaping his next move. His success in Spain had earned him trust, influence, and access. Soon, he would rise higher in British intelligence. And from that height, the greatest betrayal in modern espionage would finally begin. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, Europe began to rebuild. Yet in the dusty corridors of British intelligence, the shadow of Spain lingered. The secret war fought in Madrid had no medals, no parades, and no graves marked with names. Many of its operatives simply vanished from record, lost in the fog of bureaucracy and secrecy. For MI6, the Iberian campaign had been both a triumph of deception and a lesson in betrayal. As peace settled across Europe, the files from Madrid, Lisbon, and Gibraltar were quietly sealed. Reports labeled GoldenEye, Silhouette, and Mincemeat Iberia section were locked away in iron cabinets within MI6 headquarters. The official record declared limited success, but omitted the losses, those agents who disappeared, the couriers who never reached Lisbon, the radio man whose signals fell silent. When declassification began decades later, large portions of these documents were redacted or destroyed entirely. History, one retired intelligence officer said, was never meant to know everything. In 1946, Alan Hilgarth returned to London, weary and hollow-eyed. He received polite commendations for his discreet service in Spain, then was quietly retired. To the public, he was a diplomat who had maintained relations with Franco's regime. To those who knew better, He was the man who had kept Spain neutral through deception, bribery, and sheer nerve. But in private correspondence, Hilgarth expressed doubt about what the secret war had achieved. "We kept Spain from Hitler," he wrote, "but perhaps we lost ourselves to shadows in the process." Kim Philby, on the other hand, rose rapidly through the ranks. His success coordinating operations in Spain and Portugal, coupled with his apparent brilliance in intelligence analysis, earned him the position of head of Section 9 MI6's Counterintelligence Division, responsible for rooting out Soviet spies. It was a cruel irony. The man who had quietly undermined MI6 operations in Spain would now be trusted to guard Britain from the very threat he served. Spain itself slipped back into uneasy silence under Franco. Many of the wartime agents who had aided MI6 were left behind, unacknowledged, unprotected, and often hunted by the same Spanish police they once bribed. A few found asylum in Gibraltar or Portugal, but most disappeared into obscurity. The British government offered no recognition. Secrecy demanded denial. One Spanish double agent, interviewed anonymously in 1961, said bitterly, "England paid in gold and silence." Both run out quickly. In 1947, a British officer traveling through Madrid discovered an old briefcase hidden behind a false wall in a defunct MI6 safehouse. Inside were personal letters, coded documents, and a worn leather notebook. The final entry read, "If the war ever ends, they will forget us. But the silence will remember." The name on the inside cover was Arthur Selby, the radio operator from Operation GoldenEye, missing since 1942. The notebook was quietly sent to London and buried in the archives. His family was never informed. Through the 1950s and 1960s, the truth of MI6's Iberian operations faded into rumor. Official histories of World War II mentioned Spain only in passing, a neutral observer of Europe's conflict. Yet, for those who had lived it, Spain was anything but neutral. It was a theater of invisible conflict, where loyalty was currency and love of country demanded secrecy unto death. The emotional scars of that war never healed. Letters from former agents reveal a haunting loneliness, the struggle of men and women who had lived double lives and could never again speak freely. "It is not killing that haunts me," one wrote, "but the pretending. We loved and lied in equal measure." Their service, like their sorrow, remained unacknowledged. When Philby defected to Moscow in 1963, the truth began to unravel. His betrayal exposed decades of compromised intelligence and shattered the quiet pride MI6 had held in its wartime successes. Files were re-examined, missions reclassified, and old disappearances revisited. It became clear that the seeds of his treachery had been sown long before. Back in Madrid, during those nights of smoky cafes and coded glances, when trust itself was a luxury too dangerous to afford. Today, historians still debate the full extent of MI6's shadow war in neutral Spain. Much remains hidden, buried under layers of classification and time. Some say that even now, certain files are kept sealed not for national security, but out of respect for those who vanished without recognition. Perhaps the most fitting tribute came from an unnamed intelligence officer who had served under Hilgarth. When asked what the war in Spain had taught him, he simply replied, "That silence is not peace. It is only the space between lies." In the end, the story of MI6's shadow war in neutral Spain is not one of victory or defeat. It is one of endurance, love, and loss. It is the story of men and women who fought without uniforms, who guarded secrets that history chose to forget, and who lived forever in the space between truth and disappearance. Their war ended on paper in 1945. But their silence never did.